So that's it. That's the whole thing right there. We got two radios. We got a little box in the middle that tells them what to do to each other. And that's going to be it. In our last video, we kind of talked about the repeater, why we want a repeater, why we need a repeater. In this video, we're going to cover one of those gaps that we came up with in the last video, which is when you don't own a repeater, what do you do? Well, when we're done today, you'll know how to build one so that you will have one at your disposal. Everything we do is going to be here at the table. We're not going outside today. This is all just about building this here at the kitchen table. And we'll do a video later on where we'll actually deploy it, and we'll talk about some different aspects of deployment at that time. Before I begin, I wanted to be sure and give credit where credit is due. Is much of the bones of this project, they come from another YouTube channel, Civil Defense Engineer, and I just wanted to give a shout out to him and tell him thank you for the information. It was very useful and I really appreciate it, and just wanted to let you know where the basis for this came from. So like I said in the last videos, when it comes to programming the radios, we're going to program them here as well. We're going to program them using a computer versus using the keypad. We don't want to rush the programming. We want to understand the programming. So that's why we're going to do it here. It also has some benefits to it as well that we'll talk about later on, about why we program as much as we do from a computer versus the keypad. And there's benefits to it, and we'll talk about that. Looking at the parts for this project, it's pretty simple, and that's the way I like it, is because we're not trying to build a high-end, high-caliber repeater like what you would find a ham club using, or what you would find on a tower for a GMRS repeater. This repeater here that we're using is going to be a repeater that we put in a box that is used when we need to use a repeater at a critical moment for a temporary basis. This isn't a long-term solution. So just kind of keep that in mind. If some comments start coming up in the comment section below about some of the parts or whatnot that we use, is keep in mind is the intent of this isn't to be a tower grade repeater. This is an ad hoc repeater, if you will. So we have two UV5R pluses. This is what we went for with this repeater, to keep it simple. Also to keep the budget down to where pretty much it's it's attractable to anybody who is looking to fulfill this. I mean, granted, you can go as high caliber, as high money as you want. For what we do and for our team, this meets those needs, and this satisfies what we're trying to do. So we have our Baofeng radios that we use for the two parts of the radio part of the repeater. We also have this Unitone box that is kind of the heart of this project. This is what allows these two radios to talk to each other correctly and to work as a repeater. There will be links to all this stuff down in the description, so don't worry about trying to write anything down or keep track of what I'm talking about at this point. The other parts of this is antenna. Now, the antenna itself is a very critical aspect of this build. You can operate these radios at low power as long as you have a good quality antenna that is matched well to the frequencies that you're going to be operating at. These signal sticks, they're very flexible, they're very robust. and they work well at the frequency range that we're going to be operating at. I recommend them. Again, this is your build, so you use what you're comfortable with, what you like. We also, when we get looking at the box here, you'll see that I have some waterproof SMA connectors mounted to the box. That's very critical to maintain your waterproof aspect of your box. Easy to get, and again, they'll be down in the description. There's some internal cables, some right angle connectors, things like that that we'll go over once we get into the box. We also have this awesome little guy here. This is a 20,000 milliamp hour battery pack that sits in the box with the radios. The radios themselves have an extended battery on them, which is also a key factor that I should have pointed out earlier, and I apologize, is you want to change out your battery pack that for the UV5R. These are 3,800 milliamp batteries. You want to use the battery packs that have the USB on the bottom of them. That gives you the ability to charge them without having to be them sitting in a cradle. So definite, that will be down in the description as well. The benefit of that is, like I said, is then it gives you the ability to plug it into your battery pack. One of the things about your battery pack that you want to make sure that you make sure of is that the battery pack itself will turn on when there's a load put on it. Some of your battery packs won't. They actually you have to hit the manual on and off button for them to work. This particular battery pack, and I'll put it down in the link. The reason why Civil Defense went with this one, and I think he talks about it, and I agree, is that it has an auto on function. So as soon as there's a load sensed, it turns on. And that's definitely what you want in this box, so that you're not having to worry about whether or not it's on and charging your batteries in your radios. Let's talk about the two radios and what they do. If you notice in the beginning there is I wrote down on them a listen and a talk. Basically, this is what these two radios do. Is one of them is going to listen for a signal and the other one's going to talk when it gets a signal. I'm trying to normalize the conversation here a little bit and get away from some of the words that are used in radios, communications, that kind of thing. Get away from receiver, transceiver, transmitter, encode, decode, this type of stuff, and just kind of normalize it down to what we would want to use when we're sitting around a table talking about this with our team. So that's kind of the way this is going to work, is as we build this here on our bench, we're going to build it first out here where we can see it and we can touch it and we can see how it all fits together, and then after that we'll worry about putting it in the box. So this radio here is the listen, and basically what it's doing is it's just listening for when I talk to it from another radio. It has one frequency in it and one frequency only, and that's the one that it's listening to, so that when I key up a Baofeng or I key up another radio that has that frequency and has that tone in it, that knocking tone that we'll talk about here later in it, that it is ready to listen and understand and receive that that conversation. Once it receives that conversation, the talk radio is then going to get that information from the receive radio through our box and then transmit it back out on a different frequency. This is how the premise of this whole repeater, of any repeater really, is that it receives on one frequency and it transmits on another. And that's pretty much it. Easy, it's very simple. There's and that's where we're going to keep it. Okay, so now we're going to take this and we're going to use it to actually build out our repeater. We're going to first build it here on the table so we can kind of see how everything's interconnected, and then we'll worry about putting it in the box after we've done a proof of concept on it. So we're going to hook up, we're looking at our relay box here. There's on the face of it, it says receive and transmit, which is our listen and our talk. And that's basically as complex as it gets. Is here on the side of the radio, you open it up where your mic and your headset, where your Kenwood connector is, and you just plug it in. Now, before you turn on any of your radios at any time, it is always a great idea to make sure that you have your antennas connected. Whether it's a larger antenna or whether it's a dummy load, you always want to make sure you have somewhere for that signal to go so that you don't end up damaging your radio by transmitting it without a load. And that is why we use radio stands, which incidentally, a link in the description on where you can pick up some of these desktop stands that help keep these things from flopping around on you. They're definitely a plus. Okay, so simply this is our repeater. It's built. That's it. Easy peasy, right? We're not trying to overcomplicate this thing. We're just trying to make it to where we can do it and understand what's going on. So like we talked about before, we have our listen radio, we have our talking radio. The two are connected by our box, and that's it. That's all it takes. So now we're going to turn these on. We're going to key up our radio here that is set to talk to these two. We have another radio set off to the side here. I'll see if we can pick it up on the mic. Check, check, 1, 2, check, check. That's it. It's working. For safety, and make sure you don't damage your equipment, you want to make sure that you have separation between your listening antenna and your talking antenna. The reason why we use the longer coax, which I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the parts, but it will be done in the description, is you want to use a 10 to 15 foot coax for each side. This gives you the ability to place your antennas far enough apart where you're not going to have that crossover coming in and hurting one radio or the other. You don't want your receiver, your listen antenna to be blown away, your listen radio to be blown away by the signal coming out of your talk radio. So you want to make sure that you have them split apart enough to where that's not going to happen. Let's talk about programming. For the programming of our repeater, we're going to be using CHIRP, which I have up on the screen here, to program the listen and the talk radios. I like to use CHIRP. I like to do this like we're doing it now. Like I said, it's because it's a lot easier for me to be able to do it through this system here than it is to be able to hand picking on the radio, trying to remember different menu keys, different function keys, through it. Here, everything is kind of laid out and it's a lot easier. The other thing I like about doing it in CHIRP or in a CPS program is it allows me to save copies. If I ever need to change out a radio, it's easy enough just to grab a new one, push that load to it, and it's back up and running. The same goes for any of the other radios that I'm going to be using to talk through this repeater. Is I program them using a CPS software. That way, if I have additional radios I need to program, I'm not having to do it from the screen. I'm able to just connect them, upload the file to them, and we're rolling. With the programming of your listen and talk radios, your listen radio only needs 3 things. That is, what frequency is it going to listen to? What is the secret knock that it's going to pay attention looking for? And how sensitive is the radio going to be? So the mouth or talk radio only needs 2 things. It needs to know what frequency it's going to talk on and the power that it's going to talk on that frequency at. Because we use a good quality antenna and because we're wanting to keep the heat down in the box, which we'll talk about more in the future video that when we talk about deployment. We use low power. And when we look at the programming for the talk side, you'll see that it is set to the low power. And that's it for the repeater. So now let's look at our programming of these within the CHIRP so we can kind of see how that all applies. For our listen radio, you'll see here that the frequency is set to the 421.1 like we talked about. We've decided on this knock tone of 159.8. The power for this particular radio, it doesn't matter because it's not transmitting. It probably should be set to low. And again, this is one of the benefits of using this in the CP program versus on the menu itself, or on the radio itself. Is now that I've made this change, I can just go ahead and save this right now. And then I'll push it out to the radio. The radio will have this update in it, and any other radio that I need to use for the listen will have that in it as well. It's not a setting that I'm going to have to remember, oh, I need to make sure I do that. It's already in here. Once I load it up, it's done. So there you saw a good case in point as for why the CPS software is the way to go. The settings menu here, you're going to be looking under basic settings, and you're looking at this carrier squelch level. This carrier squelch level is where you set how sensitive you want the radio to be. How weak of a signal do you want it to pay attention to? So they recommend, 5 is your starting point. As you can see, I have this one set to 3. You can, of course, adjust it up and down as what fits your needs, but this is where you find it, is in settings, basic settings, and 3. There are other settings in here that we can get into in other videos. If you let me know down in the comments that you want me to go through these settings, I'd be happy to, but for the focus of this video, we're going to leave these settings alone because we're just talking about how to get the repeater up and running. Looking at the talk radio software, the plug for it, you can see we have our frequency in here, we have the name of the channel, we have the power that is set to low, and that's basically it. The key thing to look at here is your listen and your talk are not going to be on the same frequency. If you remember from looking at the rabbit at the listen, you're going to see that it is set to 421.1. That is what the listen side is listening for. The talk side is going to talk at 426.1. Okay, so we just talked about programming of the listening, programming of the talking. Let's talk about the programming of the radios that will use the repeater. If you remember right, when we were looking at our listen and our talk, we had 2 different frequencies in there. Our listen is listening on the frequency of 421.1 megahertz. When it talks, it is going to talk on 426.1. This is pretty much your standard 5 megahertz split that you will find in ham repeaters, which is where the frequencies are that we're playing with. So I just went ahead and left that at that traditional split. When we look at a radio that we're going to be using with it, we have to understand how those radio frequencies work with this radio and how to make it work with the repeater, which is something that has screwed me up more times than one. So we're wanting this to listen when this talks, and we're wanting this to talk on the listen. So the output frequency, our talk frequency, was 426.1. So that is the frequency that your users' radios are going to operate at. They're going to listen to this talk, so they're going to have to listen on 426.1. When they go to talk to the repeater, they need to be on the same frequency and have the same code, the knock code, as what the listen radio is listening for. So it is listening for 421.1. So that is what your field radios have to be talking at. The PL code, the knock code, is just a identifying code to this receiver to tell it, hey, pay attention. Somebody you want to listen to is talking now. That's all it does. It's not an encoding frequency. It's not a super secret frequency. The only thing it does is just let this receiver know that, hey, this radio frequency that's coming in, this person that's talking now, I need to go ahead and do something with their frequency. And that's it. It's nothing real magical. It's nothing that's going to do any sort of encryption with your channels. So just keep that in mind. So we did some building. We got it built up here. I want to talk about some things that could possibly go wrong, some things that could trip you up. We went over the programming. You make sure that you got those basic 3 things in your listen, that basic 2 things in your talk of what frequencies, how those frequencies relate to your field radios, and that's 99% of it. That is the biggest hurdles. But some other things that could trip you up is your antennas. We kind of talked about this a little bit, and I just want to reiterate it again, is that if your antennas are too close to each other when you're trying to function as a repeater, you're going to get some bad hum, you're going to get some ugly noise that comes out of it. So just be aware of that if you start to have that, the first thing to check is your antenna placement. Make sure that they're not too close to each other. Another thing that kind of bit me as I was getting everything set up and testing here is I hooked it all up and was doing some, pre-game checks, if you will, and I noticed that the receiver was receiving, but the transmit wasn't transmitting, and so I was like, okay, what's going on here? What am I missing? What am I forgetting? I was getting ready to get out the Surface again to check the software, make sure that I hadn't screwed up my output frequencies or my PL codes or something like that. And then I had just a hit, an idea hit me is maybe it's something not that, because these Baofangs are renowned for being very intolerant or very temperamental about having things plugged into them. So that's the first thing I did, was I checked to make sure that both of these connections were actually in, and lo and behold, on this talk one, it was kind of sitting there just enough to where it looked, I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see this on the video, it looked like it was plugged in, but when you gave it a little push, you felt it click. So be sure to check that. Make sure that these are in there tight and snug, especially when we start putting everything in the box, because nothing's worse than getting it all in the box and then having to tear it all apart to figure out what went wrong. The other thing that can go wrong, like I kind of talked about, is your PL code. Making sure that your listen and your talk are set up right, and make sure that that tone is set up right so that the listening radio is indeed listening for the right tone, and that your field radios are putting out the right tone. Okay, so we've tested everything on the bench minus the power, but that's kind of simple. It kind of plugs into the USB ports on the bottom of it, easy peasy, right? Now we're going to slap it in the box here. We're going to look at what it takes to make it all wedge in here successfully. I'm not going to suggest to you which box to use or not use. You can go to Harbor Freight, grab a box. You can grab a Pelican, whatever you want to grab. Just make sure that it's big enough to fit your radios. Make sure it's, everything fits in there comfortably. Make sure it's watertight. Nothing would be worse than getting it out there, deploying it, and have a leak. On that note, one of the things that I did on here was these SMA connectors that are on here, these are pigtailed SMA connectors that have a washer on them. So they are waterproof, so that once I drilled the holes in here for the connectors, I was able to put those washers on there that came with the pigtails, and I didn't lose my water tightness on the box. So these will be down in the description below so that you can kind of take a look at them. I think I got them on Amazon, so you can do a search for waterproof SMA bulkhead and, you know, find them that way as well. Another thing that I did is on the end of the connectors is, I'll show you this once I start building it, but I put these right angle connectors on there. And the reason I did that was, as I was putting the radios in here, as you'll see, I was getting a pretty ugly bend in the coax, and I didn't like that. So I wanted something on here that was going to let these tie into the radios a little bit better without having that sharp bend in the coax. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and tear this down and turn off my radios, unplug the relay box, and depending on your box that you get to build this, your mileage will vary, and how you have to build it will vary. So this is my receive here. This is my high-tech job I did on cutting the foam out. So that's our receive. There's our transmit. Now the other thing I did, which you may or may not be able to see on the camera there, is I labeled my antennas R and T on here so that way I know which radio they go to. Put my foam in there, nice and pretty. I'm gonna disconnect this guy here. Okay, make sure we get a firm snap on that connector. Feed down our extra cable back down into the bottom here. And again, if you decide to cut yours up and place your radios in there differently, it's by all means. It's you know, make sure it works for you, make sure it fits what you need it to fit, right? All right. Tie in our transmit. Make sure we got that good snap on there. Okay, make sure these are tight. So you can see that we'll have our antennas won't have any stress on the coaxes there. Our battery pack goes right there. We got our USB plugged in for charging. Okay. Gonna pull off our dust covers. All right, let's turn on our radio. Now make sure when you turn on the listen radio that the volume is up nearly all the way. It needs that extra volume to make sure that it's keying the push keying the push to talk on the transmit radio. So you want to make sure that it's turned up nearly all the way. If when you do your test that it does not key the talk radio, be sure to check that volume. That can definitely be a culprit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and test it now. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we are golden. We have a good test. So I'm going to go ahead and power these down. And the build is complete. And now we're going to talk a little bit about cosmetics. One, you want to make sure that the color that you get for your box, especially out here where we are in the desert, you know, our biggest challenge, especially with something like this, is heat. And we want to make sure that the color that we get is going to help it be not a heat magnet, you know. So you don't want to go with a black. You want to go with something that's going to be a little more tolerant, like say a coyote hat, you know, like a coyote or a sand or a khaki, you know, something like that. Or you can go and you can attempt to do a camouflage like I did. Something to keep in mind though is that I did not properly prepare this case before I painted it. So that's why you got these chips, these scuffs in here, is it would be a little bit more tolerant of that kind of stuff if I had went through and roughed it. And before I repaint it, I will do that. I will scuff it up. I will abrase it a little bit to improve the adherence of the paint. So there's lots of good videos out there. You guys probably know a lot more about the painting aspect of it than I do. So be sure to look into that before you do paint it. The other thing is, if you paint the inside of it, which obviously it's your box, you can if you want, make sure that you protect your gasket. Make sure you don't get any paint on your gasket, because that will, you know, reduce its effectiveness. You know, make sure that anything in here that you don't want paint on is out of here. You know, obvious things, right? But electronically wise, you know, have your electronics out of here. And I would say just, you know, watch that seal, make sure that you protect that seal. All right, so next time we will throw this thing up on a hill. We'll do some long distance testing between myself and Chris and put it to the test and see what it looks like when it's out up on out in the field. We'll talk at that point about some of the concerns, some of the things you need to take into account, take into consideration when you are deploying it, such as heat, such as coverage, you know, protection from the elements, protection from unnecessarily it being visible to people, however you want to say that. You know, we don't want to make this thing incredibly obvious when it's out there, and that's one of the other reasons I like these smaller antennas, is they have a good gain on them. And you know, I think that if you, with a slight modification of a certain white tip, you know, it would be kind of hard to see. So that's the kind of things that I'd take a look at. Please leave any comments below on any suggestions, any improvements to this project. I'm always looking for ideas of how to make it better, how to share that information with you guys about what we can do to make these projects work better for us. You know, we're a community. We're here to help each other. We're here to improve and grow as a team, right? So with that in mind, is please let me know too if you're programming, if you have problems with CHIRP, if you have problems trying to get your radio connect up to your computer. I know that can be a little bit of a bear sometimes. So, you know, post those down in the comments, and, you know, I do read them, I do look at them, so hopefully we can get you some help if you do run into any headaches with your CPS software. You know, I look forward to the next video in this of going up the hill. At that time, it'll probably still be hot out here, so we'll be sure to have our water with us and all that good stuff like that. And that kind of leads me into, that I want everybody to remember, and that's to take care of yourselves, exercise, eat, get some sleep. Remember that you have people that are counting on you. And, that's the reason why we're doing this type of stuff, right? Is to be prepared, to be ready, to be capable in the event that we need to go that little bit of an extra mile. So thanks again. Leave us some comments, like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one.